My sister is more qualified than you'll ever be." Those words hit me like a sledgehammer to the gut. Austin Whitfield stood there in that glass conference room, red-faced and practically vibrating with his daddy's authority, while half the engineering department pretended not to stare through the windows like we were some kind of corporate gladiator match. I'm Chuck Brennan, 48 years old, and I'd been busting my tail at Whitfield Technologies for 22 years. Started there right out of college when the company was just 50 people crammed into a converted warehouse in Austin, Texas. Back then, Vincent Whitfield actually knew every employee's name and would roll up his sleeves during crunch time. Now we're 800 employees, and his son Austin thinks he can just erase me like a typo. Let me back up a bit. When I graduated from Texas State with my engineering degree in 2002, Whitfield Tech was this scrappy little company that made industrial monitoring equipment. Nothing fancy, just solid, reliable systems that kept factories running. Vincent hired me as a junior engineer for $38K a year, and I thought I'd hit the lottery. Those early years were something else. We'd work 12-hour days, share pizza in the break room, and everybody pitched in wherever needed. I remember Vincent's wife bringing homemade cookies to the office, and their kids, Austin and Madison, running around the warehouse during summer breaks. Austin was maybe 10 then, all gap teeth and energy. Madison was 7, shy and always carrying around some art project. I worked my way up the old-fashioned way. Junior engineer to senior engineer to team lead to systems specialist. Every promotion earned, every raise justified with real results. I designed monitoring systems for oil refineries, chemical plants, manufacturing facilities across the Southwest. Good, honest work that kept people safe and companies profitable. The thing about industrial engineering is that it's all about patience and precision. You can't fake experience when lives are on the line. A poorly designed safety system doesn't just cost money, it can kill people. That's something you learn after 22 years in the trenches, something no MBA program can teach you. Around 2018, I started noticing compliance becoming a bigger headache for our clients. New regulations, changing standards, audits that could shut down entire facilities if the paperwork wasn't perfect. The compliance automation market was exploding. Analysts were saying it would hit $15 billion by 2025. Companies were hiring armies of compliance officers just to keep track of it all. That's when the idea hit me. What if we could automate most of this? I started working on it during my lunch breaks, sketching diagrams on napkins, running calculations on my home computer. The concept was simple but powerful. A system that could monitor industrial processes in real time, automatically flag potential compliance issues, and generate the documentation needed for audits. It would save companies millions in compliance costs and eliminate human error. For 3 years, I developed this system on my own time, nights, weekends, using my own resources. I'd test concepts at work when I could, but the core development happened in my garage workshop, the same place I'd taught myself programming back in the 90s. This wasn't just about creating another monitoring tool. I was building something that could revolutionize how industrial facilities handled regulatory compliance across multiple sectors. Vincent had always encouraged innovation, even gave us 20% time to work on personal projects like Google does. But as the company grew and Austin started taking on more responsibility, that culture changed. Suddenly everything had to go through committees, had to align with strategic initiatives, had to be approved by people who'd never held a wrench or debugged a control system. That's about when I noticed Madison hanging around more. She'd graduated from University of Texas with a marketing degree and tried her luck in Silicon Valley for a few years. From what I heard through the office grapevine, she'd joined some trendy startup that burned through $5 million in funding before collapsing. Now she was back home, looking for her next opportunity. She started showing up to our engineering meetings, claiming she wanted to understand the technical side of the business. Fair enough, lots of family members learn different departments. But something felt off about the questions she was asking. Not the broad curiosity of someone trying to understand how things work, but very specific questions about algorithms, data structures, implementation details. I'd catch her photographing whiteboards after brainstorming sessions, claiming she was documenting ideas for the marketing team. She'd ask to see documentation for systems I was developing, saying she needed to understand our capabilities for client presentations. Red flags, but subtle ones. The final straw came during a team meeting about automation possibilities. I was walking through some concepts on the whiteboard, nothing proprietary, just general approaches to compliance monitoring. Madison was taking notes on her phone, which wasn't unusual. Lots of people do that. But when I glanced over her shoulder, she wasn't typing notes, she was recording video. That's when I heard her comment to some younger engineers by the coffee machine a few days later. "It's amazing how fast technology moves these days," Madison had said, stirring cream into her latte. "If someone doesn't protect their intellectual property, it's basically fair game, right? Like, ideas are just floating around until someone actually does something with them." At the time, I'd figured she was talking about general industry trends. Looking back, it felt like a confession. That night, I made a decision that would save my career and expose their whole operation. I called my buddy Jerry Patterson, who'd left engineering to become a patent attorney. We'd kept in touch over the years, and I knew he specialized in intellectual property for tech companies. "Jerry," I said, "I need to file a patent, and I need to do it quietly." "What kind of system are we talking about?" he asked. I walked him through my automation framework, the algorithms, the data structures, the compliance monitoring protocols I'd been developing. Jerry was quiet for a long moment. "Chuck," he finally said, "this could be worth serious money. The compliance automation market is exploding. How sure are you that you developed this independently?" "Dead sure. I've got 3 years of documentation, all on my personal equipment, all on my own time." "Then let's get this filed before anyone else gets the same idea." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Jerry's downtown office, signing papers that would change everything. U.S. Patent Application 11,847,632. Automated Compliance Monitoring and Response Systems for Multi-Tier Data Environments. The filing fee was $1,600 out of my own pocket, but it was the best investment I ever made. "The process usually takes 18 to 24 months, Jerry explained, sliding the documents into a manila envelope. "But your application is solid. Clean technical specifications, clear claims, no prior art conflicts that I can find. You should get approval. What if Whitfield tries to claim ownership?" Jerry shook his head. "You developed this on your own time, with your own resources. No employment agreement assigns your personal patents to the company. As long as you can prove independent development, you're golden." That was March 2022. By December, I had my approval letter from the USPTO. Patent granted, U.S. Patent 11,847,632. Chuck Brennan listed as sole inventor. I kept the certificate in my home safe and didn't tell a soul at work. Meanwhile, Madison had been busy. She'd somehow convinced Vincent to create a new position for her, Chief Innovation Officer, and was making noises about revolutionizing the company's approach to industrial automation. Austin, who'd been promoted to VP of Operations despite having zero technical background, was eating it up. The writing was on the wall, but I figured I had job security. 22 years of institutional knowledge, relationships with every major client, systems that I'd personally designed and maintained. They needed me, even if they didn't appreciate me. I was wrong. The axe fell on a Tuesday morning in February. Austin called an all-hands meeting in the main conference room, the one with glass walls that let the whole office watch whatever drama was unfolding inside. Half the engineering team was there, plus a few people from sales and project management. Madison sat in the corner chair, smiling that rehearsed plastic smile rich kids perfect in private school. She was 29, had that marketing degree from UT, and her biggest achievement was watching a tech startup crash and burn in Silicon Valley. But she was Austin's sister, and that apparently made her qualified to take over systems I'd spent decades building. "We're making some strategic changes to better align with our innovation goals," Austin began, thumbing through a thick folder like he was auditioning for CEO of the Year. He had this way of talking that made everything sound like a TED Talk, lots of buzzwords but no actual substance. "The compliance automation space is evolving rapidly," he continued, "and we need leadership that understands the modern technical landscape. Fresh thinking, not legacy approaches. Legacy approaches. 22 years of keeping industrial facilities safe and compliant, and this 32-year-old with an MBA from Daddy's alma mater calls it legacy." This wasn't just about restructuring. They were positioning themselves to steal credit for work they couldn't begin to understand. Effective immediately, Chuck Brennan will be transitioning out of his role as Senior Systems Engineer. Madison will be taking over as Chief Innovation Officer for the Compliance Automation Framework. We need vision, not maintenance. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. You don't survive 22 years in corporate engineering without learning to control your reactions. Inside, though, something clicked into place. They weren't just firing me. They were setting up to use my patent without knowing I owned it. Madison stood up and actually patted me on the shoulder. like I was a family dog being put down. "Thanks for getting everything organized, Chuck," she said. "I'll take it from here." The condescension was unreal. This woman who couldn't debug a simple control loop was thanking me for organizing work that she couldn't understand if I explained it with finger puppets. But now I knew why they were really doing this. Eliminate the inconvenient fact that someone else had created their revolutionary technology. Austin clapped alone. The sound echoed in that glass box like a gunshot. The rest of the team just sat there, awkward and silent, knowing they were watching something ugly, but unable to look away. A few of the younger engineers were already pulling out their phones, probably updating their LinkedIn profiles. "You can collect your things this afternoon," Austin said, tapping his Apple Watch like this whole thing was beneath his precious time. "Security's already been notified. We'll have HR walk you through the transition paperwork." I didn't say a word, just stood up, straightened my tie, and walked out. But here's the thing about being 48 years old with 22 years in the trenches. You learn to think about consequences, not just emotions. And I had something they didn't know about. The security escort was humiliating but brief. Some 23-year-old kid in an ill-fitting uniform watched me pack my personal items into a cardboard box while HR lady rattled off COBRA information and non-disclosure agreements. They were so focused on making sure I didn't take any company property that they never thought about what I might have developed on my own. My desk was clean. Within an hour, 22 years reduced to a box of coffee mugs, family photos, and a desk lamp I'd bought with my own money. The hardest part was walking past the engineering lab where I'd mentored dozens of young engineers over the years. Some of them looked like they wanted to say something, but what could they do? Austin held their paychecks hostage too. That night I sat in my kitchen eating leftover Chinese takeout and staring at the patent certificate I'd pulled from the safe. U.S. patent 11,847,632, approved and active. Chuck Brennan, sole inventor. The system that Madison thought she now owned actually belonged to me, and I had the legal documentation to prove it. My phone buzzed with texts from former colleagues. Dave Martinez from the testing lab. "This is bullshit, Chuck. You built half the systems in this place." Sarah Kim from project management. "They're making a huge mistake. You were the institutional knowledge. I appreciated the support, but sympathy wouldn't pay my mortgage. What I needed was strategy. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about 22 years of building something that mattered, only to watch privileged kids try to steal credit for work they couldn't understand." I opened my laptop and started researching intellectual property law, specifically how patent rights work when former employees claim ownership of innovations. The more I read, the better I felt about my position. Independent development, personal resources, no company IP assignment clause. I had every legal advantage. 3 days after getting fired, I was sitting in my kitchen wondering what the hell to do with the rest of my life when my phone buzzed with a text from Dave Martinez. Dave was one of the good ones, worked his way up from technician to senior engineer, still got his hands dirty when needed. We'd been through a dozen projects together over the years. "You didn't get this from me," the text said, followed by a PDF attachment. I opened it on my laptop. Whitfield Technologies, client presentation, final v3.pptx. The first slide made my blood pressure spike. Revolutionary compliance automation, powered by innovation. There was the company logo, Madison's name as presenter, and a tagline about cutting-edge solutions for the modern industrial landscape. I clicked to slide 2 and felt like I'd been sucker punched. My diagram. Not something inspired by it, not a variation. My exact flowchart, down to a small vector error in the bottom left corner that I'd never bothered fixing. It was like seeing someone wearing your face. Slide 3 showed the mathematical algorithms I'd developed over 3 years of late nights and weekend testing. The formulas were identical, but now they were labeled "Developed by Madison Whitfield, Chief Innovation Officer." Developed, like she'd spent years hunched over a computer, debugging code and testing edge cases, like she'd ever written a line of functional programming in her life. I scrolled through 23 slides of my work, with Madison's name stamped all over it. System architecture, user interface mockups, implementation timelines, everything I'd built, repackaged as her innovation. The presentation was scheduled for the following week with Hartley Industries, a Fortune 500 manufacturing conglomerate that operated facilities across the Midwest. This wasn't just career theft. This was a multi-million-dollar contract they were chasing with my patented technology, and they had no idea I owned the rights to every algorithm, every process flow, every innovation they were about to claim as their own. I sat back in my kitchen chair and laughed. Actually, laughed out loud. These people had fired me, stolen my work, and were about to pitch it to one of the biggest potential clients in our industry, and they had no clue that I held U.S. patent 11,847,632, which covered every single methodology in their presentation. But I didn't call a lawyer or fire off angry emails. 22 years in engineering teaches you that the best solutions come from careful analysis, not emotional reactions. I needed to understand exactly what they were doing before I decided how to respond. Over the next few days, I started getting more intel from former colleagues who were disgusted by what they'd witnessed. Sarah Kim forwarded me internal emails about the Hartley presentation. Mike Torres, who'd worked under me for 5 years, sent screenshots of Madison's preparation notes, questions about system architecture that proved she didn't understand the first thing about how the technology actually worked. The most damning evidence came from Lisa Coleman in IT security. She'd always been meticulous about access logs, and she owed me a favor from when I'd helped her son with a college engineering project. She sent me data showing Madison had accessed my secure project folders multiple times over the past 6 months, often on weekends when she thought nobody would notice. She definitely copied files, Lisa's email said. The access patterns show sustained downloads from your development directories. Want me to document this officially? Not yet, I replied, but keep those logs safe. The picture was becoming clear. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision to steal my work after firing me. This was a long-term plan. Madison had been systematically copying my research for months, probably with Austin's knowledge and Vincent's blessing. They'd fired me not because my work was outdated, but because they wanted to eliminate the inconvenient fact that someone else had created their revolutionary technology. I spent the weekend researching intellectual property law and building my case. Patent documentation, development timelines, access logs, email chains showing my 3-year innovation process. Everything carefully organized in digital folders with backup copies stored in 3 different locations. The compliance automation market was massive. Analysts projected $15 billion in revenue by 2025. My system could capture a significant portion of that market, especially with applications across manufacturing, energy, chemical processing, and aerospace sectors. This wasn't just about one client presentation. This was about the future of an entire industry segment. But I still needed to know their exact timeline and strategy. That's when I remembered Patricia Reynolds. Patricia was a compliance analyst at Hartley Industries who I'd worked with on a project about 5 years back. She was sharp, thorough, and had always appreciated my technical expertise. More importantly, she was exactly the kind of person who would be evaluating Whitfield's presentation. I called her on Monday morning. "Chuck Brennan, how are you? Haven't heard from you in forever." "I'm good, Patricia. Actually, I'm calling about something a bit unusual. I heard through the grapevine that Hartley's looking at some compliance automation solutions." "We are. Actually, we've got a presentation scheduled this week from your company, Whitfield Technologies, some kind of new system they've developed." "That's interesting," I said carefully. "Mind if I ask what specific technology they're pitching?" Patricia described my system in perfect detail. The algorithms, the monitoring protocols, the user interface design, every word confirmed what I already knew. They were selling my patent as their proprietary innovation. "Chuck, this sounds exactly like some concepts you showed me a few years ago." "Are you involved in this project?" "In a way," I said. "Patricia, this might sound strange, but would there be room for me to observe the presentation as an external consultant or industry observer?" There was a pause. "That's an unusual request. Can I ask why?" "Let's just say I have a professional interest in seeing how this technology gets presented." Patricia was quiet for a moment, probably sensing there was more to the story. "You know what? I think I can make that happen. We sometimes have industry observers for major vendor presentations. I'll add you to the attendee list. I appreciate that. And Patricia, you might want to have your legal team ready to ask some questions about intellectual property ownership. Now you've really got my attention." "Chuck, what's going on? You'll see Wednesday morning. Trust me, it'll be worth your time." Wednesday morning couldn't come fast enough. I had 18 months of documentation in my briefcase and 22 years of righteous anger to fuel what came next. Then I remembered something else Madison had said during that coffee machine conversation. After talking about IP being fair game, she'd laughed and added, "Besides, who's going to check?" Most engineers are too busy building to worry about the paperwork side. She was about to learn why that paperwork matters. Wednesday morning arrived gray and cold, typical February weather in downtown Austin. I drove to Hartley Industries corporate offices wearing my best suit and carrying a black leather folder that contained 18 months of carefully documented evidence. No nerves, no dramatic speeches planned, just patience and paperwork, an engineer's revenge. The conference room was exactly what you'd expect from a Fortune 500 company. Floor-to-ceiling windows, polished walnut table, leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Austin was already there, pacing and practicing his pitch like some kind of corporate peacock. Madison sat with her MacBook open, scrolling through slides she'd stolen but didn't understand. They didn't notice me in the back row. To them, I was just another guy in a suit, probably somebody's assistant or a junior analyst. Patricia had introduced me as Chuck Brennan, industry consultant, which was technically accurate if you considered unemployment a form of consulting. The presentation started with the usual corporate fluff: market opportunities, growth projections, synergistic solutions that would revolutionize the compliance landscape. Austin was in his element, throwing around buzzwords like he was being paid by the syllable. Whitfield Technologies has always been at the forefront of industrial innovation, he said, clicking to a slide showing the company's history. Today, we're excited to share our latest breakthrough in automated compliance monitoring, a system that will transform how Fortune 500 companies handle regulatory requirements. Then Madison took over for the technical section, and I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing. She stood up, straightened her blazer, and launched into an explanation of my system using language she'd clearly memorized without understanding. Our proprietary automation framework represents a paradigm shift in compliance monitoring, she said, clicking to my flowchart diagram. The system utilizes recursive validation protocols and tiered response hierarchies to ensure real-time regulatory adherence across multiple industrial sectors. She was reading from notes, stumbling over recursive and mispronouncing hierarchies. This woman was trying to explain algorithms to industrial engineers using words she'd Googled the night before. It was like watching someone perform surgery with a manual they'd never read. The market potential is enormous, Madison continued, her confidence growing as she got deeper into the stolen presentation. With compliance automation projected to reach $15 billion by 2025, our system positions Hartley to capture significant market share across manufacturing, energy, and chemical processing sectors. She was using my market research, my projections, my 3 years of development work, all repackaged as Whitfield innovation. Halfway through the technical overview, Patricia raised her hand. Quick question before we continue. This methodology, has it been submitted for patent protection? The room went quiet. Austin's smile flickered for just a second before he recovered his corporate composure. It's proprietary to Whitfield Technologies, he said smoothly. Internal development over several years. But we're certainly open to discussing exclusive licensing arrangements with strategic partners like Hartley. Patricia nodded politely. That's good to know. But I asked specifically about patent protection. Has this system been filed with the USPTO? Madison's eyes darted to Austin like a cornered animal looking for escape. She clearly hadn't expected detailed questions about intellectual property ownership. We're in the process of filing, Austin said, his voice just a shade less confident than before. The paperwork is with our legal team. Patricia opened her tablet and made a note. Because I'm showing here that U.S. Patent 11,847,632 was filed and approved 18 months ago under the name Charles Brennan. The methodology described in that patent appears to match your presentation exactly. That's when I stood up. Every head in the room turned. Austin went pale like he'd seen his career flash before his eyes. Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The other Hartley executives leaned forward with sudden interest. I walked down the aisle with my black folder and handed it directly to Patricia. No dramatic speeches, no angry accusations, just documentation. Patricia, here's the complete patent filing, including development timeline and ownership verification, I said calmly. I think you'll find it addresses your questions about intellectual property rights. Patricia opened the folder methodically. Inside was my USPTO patent certificate, notarized and official. Email chains showing my 3-year development process. Access logs from Lisa Coleman proving Madison had stolen my files. Screenshots of my original diagrams with creation timestamps. And a simple cover letter stating that I was the sole inventor and owner of the technology being presented. The silence in that room was deafening. You could hear the air conditioning cycling and someone's stomach rumbling. Austin was gripping the edge of the table like it might keep him from drowning. Patricia reviewed each document carefully, then looked up at Austin. Mr. Whitfield, it appears this presentation contains patented technology that doesn't belong to your company. We'll need to suspend this discussion pending clarification of ownership rights. Austin tried to salvage it, his voice cracking slightly. There must be some misunderstanding. Chuck was our employee. Anything he developed should belong to the company. Patricia looked at me. Mr. Brennan, do you have anything to add? The patent documentation speaks for itself, I said. I developed this system independently, on my own time, using my own resources. I own it exclusively. They don't have any legal right to use or present it. I turned and walked out, leaving Austin and Madison to explain how they'd built their entire pitch around stolen intellectual property. By 4 p.m. that afternoon, my phone was ringing non-stop. Vincent Whitfield himself called around 6, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. Chuck, let's discuss this like professionals, he said. I'm sure we can reach some kind of arrangement that works for everyone. We can, I replied. But the terms just changed significantly. Your son fired me, then tried to sell my work to your biggest potential client. Any licensing discussion starts with a formal acknowledgement of theft and a public apology. That seems extreme. Not as extreme as patent infringement lawsuits. Ask your lawyers. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Patricia's office signing an exclusive licensing agreement with Hartley Industries. $220K upfront plus $85K in annual royalties, with full attribution and control over future development. They wanted the real inventor, not some knockoff version with a marketing degree. Whitfield Technologies lost the contract and their reputation took a beating when word spread through the industry. Austin got quietly reassigned to business development, corporate speak for career purgatory. Madison's chief innovation officer role was eliminated during the next quarterly restructuring. As for me, I used the licensing money to start Brennan Engineering Solutions with 3 former colleagues who'd watched the whole mess unfold. Our first-year revenue hit $950K, and we're on track to double that this year. Turns out 22 years of experience isn't outdated after all. It's just patient enough to let arrogance hang itself with its own rope.